The Bold Alone. My dear, sweet friends, welcome back to another episode of Tuesday Night Fiction. In this episode, we discuss Chapter 5 of the Civilands series, but we also mourn a dear loss. The loss of Game of Thrones. And I don't just mean that the show is over, I mean that the final season was a failure of such epic proportions that I don't really know how I'm going to put it into words. Most of what I'm going to say, or actually all of what I'm going to say, is going to be improvised when it comes to Game of Thrones, but we must get through it because part of the process of loss is grief. Hopefully brings us to acceptance at some point. But this is not that point, unfortunately, for a lot of people. I know some of my friends said they were emotional. I'm not gonna lie, I was probably pretty emotional too. It's depressing how piss poor this season has been. Anyway, we're gonna discuss something good first. We're gonna discuss Chapter 5 of the Civilands series. Like I said, You Can Run. That was our previous episode. We had a lot of exciting things going on in that episode. So there is a lot of exciting things to talk about. We're going to talk about what happened, what went into making the episode, and more. I'm also going to do a little different today. I usually kind of do a lot of promotional stuff in the beginning. I'm not going to do that. The only thing I will say for now, because if you're a civilian, you know what to do. You know to subscribe, you know to like, you know to share. And you know I sell books, and you know why this podcast is what it is. If not, stick around till the end and we'll talk about it. But to everyone who is familiar and to the new people as well, we are going to have another giveaway. So, first time we gave away the first 3 copies of the Civilands series and a copy of Ready Player One. Tonight, I'm announcing that we are going to give away the first 4 copies of the Civilands series. Now you might be wondering, hey, author guy, I didn't know there were 4 copies of the Civilands series because all your profile pictures online, everywhere I look, there looks to be only 3 books in the Civilands series. Well, guess what? There's going to be a 4th one next month. And god damn if it isn't going to be a fantastic installment as the penultimate book in the series. And for those of you who don't know what penultimate means, it means second to last. There's going to be one more. And I swear to you, it will be worth the time you invested in it. You will not get through 7 books or 7 books or series, whatever you want to call it, just to be let down by a shit ending. It will be the most satisfying ending you could ever imagine. That is my promise to you. And for one lucky person, you'll be able to make it through 1 through 4 for free. All you have to do, share this podcast. That's it. Or share the books. Whatever you want to do. Share the Civilands series, and you will win books 1 through 4 if you're selected as one lucky winner for the giveaway. Now, I know a lot of people already have books 1 to 3, and if you have books 1 to 3, don't fret. I will just send you book 4 for free, still, signed by me. And also, if you don't have the first 3 books, I'll still sign all 4 books for you. But if you do have the first 3, I'll just send you book 4. I'll send you some bookmarks as well. And I might throw in an extra thing. If it's for someone who's already got the first 3 books, I might throw in maybe a second book of my choosing or something else fun. But overall, the winner will be very happy. We already had one lucky winner last time. Like I said, first 3 books of the Civilands series and a copy of Ready Player One. I know that she is very happy to have those, and I wish her happy reading. Again, share the Civilands series in any fashion. You could share the Amazon link. You could share a link to one of these podcast episodes. You could share whatever way you like. Just promote the Civilands series to new prospective members of the Civil Gang. and welcome in yourself. So like I said, I'm going to pick one winner. If you don't have me on social media, whatever social media you decide to share it on, feel free to just take a screenshot of your share and send it to my contact form or send it to me on one of my social media links, and you will be automatically entered. So good luck. And once again, book 4 will be out in June, and it's going to blow your fucking mind. Okay? That's a promise. It's going to blow your mind. But we're still on book 1 for this podcast, this weekly podcast where we release audiobook chapters every week and then I discuss them. This is the discussion episode for chapter 5 once again. Chapter 5 is called You Can Run. Let's get into a little bit about what happened and get caught up. So in the first chapter, or in the first section of the chapter, we meet some of the Tokali for the first time. So the Tokali is the rival clan of the Vahani, who we've met a bunch of times. The Vahani are the northernmost clan, and the Tokali are their rivals in the south of the Myriad territory. And we meet Elon, his parents. So we've met Elon in the north. Elon is the Tokali who went north to basically try to win favor with the Vahani and attempt to form a union with them down south. So he's working with the Vahani of the Riverlands to get south for the sake of a union for protection against the gangs. We meet now his parents who live at the Hold. The Hold is the Tokali equivalent of the Great Fortress of the Vahani in the north. The Hold is where the Tokali are most centrally located. There are scattered camps throughout the south of the Myriad territory, but the Hold is their kind of stronghold in the south. So Malik, Elon's dad, Adila, Elon's mom, and Pharaoh, Elon's friend, and a guard for the Tokali, all are talking together on this night of section 1 because Pharaoh has an update for them. So Pharaoh brings news to them of Elon and the Vahani getting attacked by Walter Keegan's men who come to rescue him. Pharaoh lets them know that Walter Keegan was taken. And all this is brought to him through the birds. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. We're going to talk about all the magic in a little bit. I think it'll be good to recap all of the magic, mainly because I'll get to more the reason why later. Mostly Game of Thrones. But we'll get to that. So Pharaoh receives word about a little mishap that we experienced in chapter 4 with Elon and Latera, where the birds came swarming and the Keegan gang came for Walter, who was their hostage. And this troubles Malik and Adila. They're pretty worried, obviously. I mean, the sake of their son's life potentially hangs in the balance. And it's a big time of change for the Tokali because, again, the Vahani and Tokali have not historically gotten along. This move was one of desperation to seek out the Vahani. And times are changing. They are changing. So they're struggling with that. They're struggling with the worry. And basically, the decision that they come to, or that Adila comes to, as Malik kind of tries to keep some information from his wife, which isn't always smart. A little lesson to all you husbands out there. From a guy who's not married. You're welcome. But what Adila decides to do, she tells Malik and Pharaoh that their best course of action is to evacuate their smaller camps, have all Tokali come to the Hold, so that when the Vahani and Elon come south, they have supplies that they can stock up on the way. Also, they want to keep the rest of their Tokali safe from while the Vahani are on the way down. So this will give the Vahani a chance to kind of stock up because, as we know from chapter 4, the Keegan gang has mostly kind of went after their supplies. They're kind of trying to make them desperate, and we find out more about that in section 2 when William is updated by Clovis and Clovis's men on the progress that they've made and how they got Walter back. So we can kind of see in that section that the Keegan gang is definitely growing. They're doing well. Daniel Keegan has gone north to the Riverlands to kind of shore up the relationships that Clovis has now basically beaten into place. And Clovis's goal now is to break the will of the Vahani who are traveling south, as he tells William. That kind of started with getting Walter back. They needed to make sure that Walter was safe, so they got him back. And their next goal is to continue and go after the Vahani. So again, the Keegan gang is doing pretty successful. They're kind of like our gang. They're kind of like our civil gang. They're killing it. They're growing by the day. And things are going very well. Very much according to plan. Basically, they want trade throughout the Marietta territory. And William's goal, as we found out, I think in Chapter 2, is to expand east eventually. So they came west to try to prove themselves. William is very desperate to prove himself to his father. So they want to establish these connections in the east. They want to build up something in the west. And then they want to expand that back east and create kind of a partnership with William's magnate father back east. This brings us to the final two sections, which I have a lot to talk about with the final two sections. A lot of good and some bad. And I'm going to be straight up as possible about this. I mean, there is a lot that I learned from this chapter. I mean, like I said, both good and bad. I think this chapter in particular was one of the best and also one of the weakest in the whole book. And I want to talk about why and all that I learned from it, because I learned so much from doing this, and hopefully I can give you a little bit of experience advice on when you want to start a new thing and you want to just go after it. You don't want to think too much. You don't want to stall. You don't want to come up with reasons why not to. You just want to do it. And you're going to learn. You're going to struggle and you're going to fail and you're going to do things wrong along the way. But as long as you put out your best effort, as long as you make sure that you do as best as you can to improve all the time and never stop improving, you will get there. You will get there. So we're going to talk about Section 3 in particular, because this is like one of the most important for me developmentally, and honestly, it's one of my, it's surprisingly at the same time as being one that I learned the most from, it's also one of my favorite in the chapter. And partly it's both, or in the book, sorry, and partly both because of the fact that I learned a lot, but also because it was a ton of fun. So as we can see, this is the second section of the Tokali. We experience a couple more of Elon's friends. He's got a very tight-knit friend group, and honestly, I think a lot of the interaction between his parents and the boys was definitely inspired by relationships I had when I was younger. I mean, growing up in high school with a lot of my friends, my parents were always heavily involved with my friend group. And I just thought it was pretty cool to kind of mirror that kind of closeness with some of the characters in the book. And I'm going to, with each chapter, I mean, there's going to be more and more that you kind of draw from inspiration from your own experience. You draw from the things that made your life better, and you want to put those experiences on paper. And that's a lot of what we see here with Elon and his friends and his parents. So after the news that Pharaoh brought Malik and Adila about Elon's predicament that he's currently in, Malik realized that now more than ever, it's a very important time for these boys to be prepared for anything, and to be ready for a fight, to be ready for danger, to be able to react with bravery, and to be up to the task that they're about to face. So what they do is they go out on a hunt. They go out on a hog hunt. And so to start off, I mean, again, one of the things I most learned from this chapter in particular, I mean, there's really not any other chapter that I noticed this strongly, or really strongly at all. I mean, I don't think much of the rest of the book suffers from this in any way. It's kind of just this chapter where I started off with a lot of exposition and teaching and trying to explain in kind of a short way, to tell rather than show, who each of Elon's friends are and why. And I think that one of the areas that helps strengthen this a little bit is that we continue right on from some of those things to actually seeing them in the hog hunt. So while I learned that it was probably best to just show that in the hog hunt, maybe give a little bit at first, but a little bit less, there is that explanation in the beginning of who each person is and kind of the things that Malik knows about them. And that's one thing for writers in particular. I mean, if you learn anything from this, it's hard to get invested when you're being told about something rather than being shown. So that's kind of one of the things that I learned. And again, just like the magic thing I was talking about a little bit earlier, we're going to get into how this relates to Game of Thrones a little bit later. Like I said, I'll try to relate as many of the things. I'm going to try to tie a lot of what I'm talking about together today. But yeah, so exposition is one thing that I learned is usually as much to avoided as much as possible from this section. But then we get into one of the most interesting sections of the book. So being able to put together this hog hunt, especially in audio format, was really cool. And being able to see how each of the boys reacts to being chased down by a hog and to having the poise, to being able to see firsthand their poise in the face of danger, is reading back through it. It was, again, it starts out with the exposition, but then it kind of goes into this firsthand experience of who each of these boys are, just through the lens of seeing how they handle danger. And we get to see that with each. So we start off with Ganon, who is not as much like the other boys. Most of the Tokali, most young men of the Tokali end up becoming warriors. Ganon instead is more of a craftsman. He's a fantastic marksman. He's known as one of the best marksmen in the hold because of his ability to work with guns. He crafts them for the Tokali. It's one of his pastimes, so he has very much familiarity with weaponry. We get to see kind of how confident he is, how the relationship he has with his rifle, and the way that translates when in a situation where he's being chased down. And at first, he doesn't shoot. I mean, the boar starts charging almost immediately, and he doesn't shoot. He just stares down. He breathes. He tries to focus as much as he can, and he kind of becomes one with his rifle. And that's where we see him grow. On the other hand, we have Pharaoh and we have Shelton, who we don't see in their pursuit, but we hear again. This is kind of an exposition, but we're still talking about something that happens just in a little bit quicker order. So Pharaoh wounds his beast. Pharaoh is the most physically imposing of the group. So he wounds his beast. The beast is slowed down, and then Pharaoh promptly slits its throat. So he takes care of business. Shelton, on the other hand, is a little more nervous. Shelton is kind of the guy who wants to show who he is. And he doesn't really know who he is, so that's a problem. Shelton represents, I think, in a lot of men, and this has been my experience too. I was talking about this today. What a lack of confidence kind of leads to in men, especially young men, and it's so hard to overcome. It's the kind of thing where you go and you do things because you seek approval, and you might not even realize you're doing it. You might not think you are actually doing it, but a lot of the decisions a lot of young men make tend to be simply to seek the approval of their peers. In Shelton's case, we find out that he is a warrior for the Tokali. He is a guard for the Tokali, like Pharaoh. But Shelton is much more driven, rather than to duty or to honor, by impressing his peers. So Shelton specifically wants to impress the ladies of the Tokali, mainly because he's not exactly the tallest and not the most physically imposing, and he suffers from it. especially in this situation, we see him suffer with his hog. He misses miserably a couple times up until the last second where he gets off a lucky shot and downs his hog. So I think what we learn, what Shelton learns there about himself, as we find out kind of towards the end, is that luck is not always going to be on your side. Sometimes your first shot is not going to hit. And the only way to correct for that is to practice and to better yourself and to focus on bettering yourself. And you can't really accomplish the things you want to accomplish. You can't be the big man that you want to be until you do that, until you look inward. You can't look outward. You can't try to look at yourself from outward. It's all about believing and finding the confidence yourself so that you don't have to be any specific thing. You could just know that you're being yourself. One area that I noticed is, one of the things I wanted to talk about, I guess, and I'll get into it now a little bit, is, I had a fantastic freaking weekend. It was a lot of fun. And one of the things I did this weekend was I went to a volleyball outing. Volleyball is a lot of fun. I like to play recreationally every now and then. And in between, so it was like a professional outing here in Austin. And in between the professionals playing, there was a group of 14-year-olds playing. It was like 14-year-old and under girls, right? And there was one team where one of the girls on one of the teams really, she was struggling. And you could see it on her face. She was frustrated. She definitely was feeling the pressure. And I know the feeling. When you aren't comfortable in your own mind, it eats at you like a cancer, and it gets to your head, and you struggle with that, and you know that everything you're doing, you're not playing to win. You're not in it to win. You're in it to not lose. And it's so hard to get out of that. And honestly, for me, that was like probably more baseball than when I played volleyball. I think when I played baseball, there was a lot of that like mentality of playing not to lose, playing to not be the one who makes the error at the end of the game, right? And that was, a lot of the time, that you struggle with that. And it until you start to see the other people around you making those mistakes, it's almost impossible to get. It's just like a kind of a vicious cycle of like, why does it always have to be me that gets the ball hit to at the end? I don't. And then when it does, it gets hit to you, and you're like, oh, just please make the play. Please make the play. And by the time you're thinking about it, it's too late. It's way too late unless you get lucky, like Shelton, right? Your shot connects, but that does not always happen. And while he gets lucky this time, again, it's kind of like you learn from that, right? It's not always going to happen that way. Your first couple shots miss by a mile for a reason. You could have had that first shot, and none of this would have been a problem if you'd prepared, right? If you'd mentally been ready. But it's hard to get in that position. A lot of young people, again, I said young men before, but it's like I just brought up an example from 14-year-old girls volleyball. It's the same thing. It's just that sense of playing to win or playing not to lose versus playing to win. And that's kind of what Shelton struggles with. That was pretty cool. I'm surprised I was able to connect those two things. Awesome. Those are a lot. Again, it's like a lot of the things that I write about are things that I either experience in daily life, and it's almost subconscious. You don't even end up thinking about it until after. It's just amazing how things connect together, especially as the story goes on, right? You get to the third and fourth and fifth books, and you're like, wow, like I wasn't sure what I was going to do here, but now everything makes sense because subconsciously it's just worked that way, right? And it's because the story's in your head, which is why Game of Thrones failed miserably. We're going to get to that. It's going to be a lot of this. This is all going to be like a circle, kind of, except the circle's going to end kind of sad, but then we'll get back to, we'll close it out on a good note. Okay, so next we have Warwick. Warwick is the creative, and again, the group of these characters is almost like like a subconscious makeup of who I am in some ways. I mean, I think a lot of times we try to put people in buckets of this is the creative guy, this is the athletic guy, but for me, I like to be into a lot of different things. So Warwick is kind of like the creative side. Warwick likes to write specifically. And again, I mean, if that's not directly related to me, I don't know who is, but it's pretty interesting. So Warwick is, again, he's kind of a little bit like Shelton, except even more timid. And because it's not his story, right? It's not his story to tell in his mind. He's not playing to win, right? I mean, to keep going around with that example and that thread. But what Warwick realizes, and again, he fails also. So he misses on a couple shots. The hog ends up taking him down in a pretty wild scene. He ends up getting a dagger into the side of the hog, but it's not a fatal blow, and the hog ends up giving him a spear to the shoulder as well, before Gannon shoots the hog dead. But what Warwick learns in that moment is, again, win or lose, he's part of the story too, right? And one of the things that we learn in the exposition in the beginning is he tells a lot of the stories of the other people of the hold. So he seeks out the stories of the other people of the hold. However, he doesn't realize that his story at times is an interesting one. He's actually promises Elon that he's going to write his story, Elon's story, one day. Elon being the one who's going in and bringing the Vahani south. However, Warwick has an interesting story himself, and I want to speak directly to you, the audience, to the civil gang, everyone involved. You have an interesting story too, and again, it goes back to the same exact thread, right? Sometimes we don't think that we have the interesting story. Sometimes we don't think we're going to be the one to make the play. Sometimes we don't think. It's almost impossible, right, to see yourself as the protagonist, right? Or to see yourself as the antagonist. But if there's anything that I learned while writing this series, it's that there's so much of me in the characters that it's made me in real life just immensely more confident. Like, just immensely, to a stupid degree, to a degree that I probably don't deserve to be. I mean, I spent, I think it was the fourth episode, the question and answers episode, literally just spewing nonsense about how great I am. I mean, and obviously it was sarcasm, but it kind of wasn't. It wasn't sarcasm at all. I mean, you learn these things though, really. I mean, like, you learn that your story is an interesting one. Your story is one that people will, on review blogs who don't know you, give you 5 stars, or 5 books, if I'm talking directly to one of my biggest fans. But nonetheless, I mean, like I said, your story is an interesting one too, even if you don't think it is, and you should tell it. You should spend every day trying to tell it. And that might not mean in author form, that might mean athletically or whatever. Like that girl who, again, was on the volleyball court, she has a story to tell. She'll learn that she has a story to tell. One day she'll be the one killing it, and she'll see the person struggling, and she won't think anymore about that. It won't be, oh God, I hope I don't fail, right? She'll believe in herself. And that's kind of what Warwick kind of comes to. Finally, we have Hammond. So Hammond is one of the reasons I'm so proud of this chapter. So Hammond is super impatient. He learns to connect, to call to the wind. Again, that is something that the Tokali have not historically done. The Tokali have not been connected to the nature as much as the Vahani have. So the Vahani can command and control the birds and the bears, right? So they can either get into the bear's mind, or they can give it direct commands, one-off kind of commands, and not get directly in its head. They could do the same with the birds. That's how they kind of send messages through the birds. And they can communicate with the animals. Those two animals in particular. That's kind of the magic established in this world. What we find out is the Tokali, who historically, like I said, they haven't paid as much mind to their connection to the environment. It hasn't been at the forefront for them. But what they discover, I mean, they knew they had the connection with the birds. Again, it's still a habit that's not as stressed, but they're learning it at the beginning of the hunt. They're trying to use control of the birds to gather their bearings. And in the beginning of the chapter, obviously, we see Pharaoh with the commands and receiving a message from Elon through the birds. However, we find out at the end that the Tokali can actually control the hogs as well, which is something that they never knew they could do. And Hammond, one of the most impatient characters, again, being from New York, I think that's probably how I see myself in Hammond. A little bit impatient at times. But again, he is able to kind of bring himself to ease. And he repeats this word. Ease. 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 And when his weapon does not shoot, it jams, he is desperate. And he yells it, and he yells it, and he yells it as he pulls his dagger out, and the hog is just charging at him and charging at him. Eventually, he screams it as loud as he can. And he realized that the command worked. The hog slowed down and stopped in front of him. And everyone there is really confused. Again, they didn't know that they could do this. They didn't know that this was an ability, this was a possibility. But now they know. And the implications of it, as the Vahani continue south, are pretty significant. And we'll find out more in this book and in later books what those implications will be. For now, so we'll get back to the magic. I will talk more about the magic. As I said, so it's Tokali are pigs and birds, hogs and birds. Vahani are bears and birds, right? So that's the magic. And finally, we'll just talk really quick about the final section of chapter 5. Jeannie discovers that Harrison, her brother, is alive. That's the big twist of the first half of the book. As you know, we started out with the fire at the Morell house, the fire that Jeannie thought took her whole family. But we'll find out in the next chapter a little bit more of how Harrison survived. Obviously, he was protected by the Kennedale sisters, who now we've pretty clearly established are pretty safe allies of the Morells and Dominic Turner, and by extension, Hansa. But we'll leave it for there for now. So Harrison is alive. And Jeannie is overjoyed, obviously, that one of her brothers survived the fire. Okay, so we recapped chapter 5. We're already at a half hour in. Sheesh. What a good discussion so far. Thank you for joining me if you made it this far. I really hope you're enjoying the series. The podcast has been exceptionally fun to make. I'll just talk really quick about kind of the making of this chapter. The hog noises were really cool, I thought. Especially the clip I put on Instagram. I mean, when you hear the clips, it's really, really cool bringing all that together, bringing the gunshots together, bringing the hogs together, bringing the music together, bringing the audio together. As always, any feedback is greatly appreciated. If there's anything you want more of, anything you want less of, anything you just want to say is awesome and feel like telling me, anything you want to say is terrible and feel like telling me, I'm always up for feedback. Again, I have a contact form, or you can reach me on social media. I use Instagram and my Facebook group page, or I don't think it's a group page. I think it's just a page. Facebook page, probably the most, but again, contact form is always good. Or YouTube. You can leave a comment in the YouTube section. Just to let me know what you think, or to just say hi, to say you want into the Civil Gang. You'll be welcome. We will welcome you. And if you don't want in, watch your fucking back. Because we're coming. Anyway, So, I think we have one more section left before I get into Game of Thrones. And actually, this will lead into Game of Thrones. So, the magic elements. So, we went over the magic elements that we know so far, right? This is a fantasy novel. There are fantasy elements in this novel. Why is that important? So, again, we have two clans that are native to the Murrieta territory. Those clans have a connection to the Murrieta territory, right? It is part of their faith. They feel it. They are of the land. The reason why this is important to a story that is a fantasy story is because you, prior to reading it, do not know this world. It is unfamiliar. It is fantastic. It is something that includes elements that you can experience in your real life. As a story goes on, when you have these kind of elements, there needs to be consistency. You need to understand what is possible. And I hope the writers of Game of fucking Thrones are listening to me, because they're going to be making the next goddamn Star Wars movie. As if Disney could ruin a classic series anymore. I mean, if they don't fire those guys after what they've done to Game of Thrones, I don't know how much worse Star Wars can get. I mean, I don't think it could. Honestly, could it get worse than Rian fucking Johnson? Rian Johnson? I think they'll give him a run for his money, to be honest. I mean, how do you... I've said this a bunch of times to my friends and stuff. How do you construct a space battle when you don't know how to construct a land battle? I mean, even with all the money in the world with HBO, the coordination of some of these battle scenes was, in season 8 of Game of Thrones, was mind-bogglingly stupid. Like, to rattle off a few, okay, and my least favorite episode 4, which was just, to me, just complete trash. I mean, just everything about it. You have a scene where a dragon gets shot down. People complain about the fact that the shots were accurate. I don't really give a shit. Sometimes characters do miraculous things, right? But characters making idiotic fucking decisions once those things are done just blows my mind. I mean, you have ships between two islands. They snuck up on you. They shot down your dragon, right? You are out in front of those ships. Those ships are not as highly elevated as the islands. Fly around the fucking island, Danny, and blow them up from behind, you idiot. Instead, she charges right at them because we need a dramatic looking shot, and we need Missandei to be caught because plot convenience. Missandei needs to be caught, so she gets caught. So, I mean, that's just one scene. Euron would essentially be dead at that point. He should have been... I mean, if the fucking dragons can kill the whole fleet... If one dragon can kill the whole fleet and King's Landing by itself, which it did in episode 5, it did it all by itself. It was the easiest siege of King's Landing you could possibly imagine. The easiest. I mean, those bows were taken out in literally, like, I don't even know, 5 minutes at most of screen time? Probably less, because a lot of the screen time beyond that was taken up by Jon and his guys, but they weren't really doing all that much. I mean, the dragon literally did everything. Everything. So, you have a couple of those. You have scenes from The Long Night where, again, I mean, the lighting is bad, but to me, more importantly, like I could get over the way things look if the story is stupid, it's unbelievable. Like, you have the Night King facing down Jon Snow, right? After the Night King falls off the dragon, he doesn't get burned by it. He's facing down Jon Snow. Jon Snow is alone in a field in front, like outside of the castle at Winterfell, right? He's standing alone in the field. The Night King raises up every zombie between him and Jon, and behind Jon, and all around Jon, there's about 1,000 zombies. And they rush him, all of them, and he's alone. And the next time we see him, we cut away from him. 1,000 zombies rushing him, we cut away from him. You'd think we would maybe want to see how he gets away from 1,000 zombies alone. But no, we don't get to see that. Instead, the next time we cut back, there's a couple stragglers chasing him or running him down one at a time. He's just, cuts them down because whatever. Honestly, like, whatever. It doesn't matter. They're going to forget. The dumbass fans are going to forget that we showed him completely surrounded anyway. Who cares? And then after, we'll put him in a tough situation again, and Dany will burn everything around him, but not him. Because, we don't really want to find out whether the fact that he's a Targaryen means that he can get burned or not. That doesn't matter. In fact, nothing about Jon Snow being a Targaryen matters. Nothing. Also, this is the same thought process that gets Luke Skywalker to be an old, decrepit man who teaches the young, new character nothing. He teaches her nothing while they're on the Yoda Island. We're gonna copy a scene, except we're gonna make it unbelievably dumb, where there's no character development or any of that. Don't make me get into The Last Jedi. I can't. And I honestly don't even want to get into the Game of Thrones. I've talked about it with friends too much. I think what I want to focus on, because we're already up to almost 45 minutes here. I don't want to talk about every single little thing, because honestly, there was nothing good about this last season. Nothing. Okay? Bran, you couldn't make a worse character than Bran that makes less sense or is less explained. Nothing was explained. But what I want to talk about is how this relates to Civilands, and how it relates to me learning from the experience, and how, if you're super interested in something, you should learn from my experience with Game of Thrones. So, storytelling has become one of the most fun things for me to do. It's become something that I love to do, and I love to understand, and I love to learn more about. As I've talked about in previous episodes, The Walking Dead was the first show that really pissed me off. That really just pissed me off. And there have been shows that I've loved. Breaking Bad, on the other hand, was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. And the ending might have been divisive, but at least it was consistent. The character did things that were consistent with who he became, and some of the lines from the end were some of the greatest I've ever heard. Like one being when Skylar asks Walter to stop telling her that it's for them. And Walter says, "You're right. It is. It wasn't for you. It was for me." In terms of a character arc, that's phenomenal. But none of the characters in Game of Thrones come to that. None of them are even the same character from the previous season. Jaime Lannister is one example. Brienne of Tarth is another example. Really every character, honestly, except maybe Bran, who is equally dumb throughout the whole series and yet becomes the king. So, one of the things I learned is character arcs. If a character is inconsistent, the story will suck. Okay? And again, relating it to Civilands, every book that I've written, with each one, I've focused specifically on the character arcs. And I think what I've learned is that from both Game of Thrones and Star Wars in particular, is it's extremely, and I'm not going to just fault these guys for everything they've done. It's extremely hard to pick up a story that someone else wrote, to feel invested in it, to adapt it, and make it yours. I couldn't imagine doing it. It's probably close to impossible to actually do in a satisfying way, because they're not living it. They haven't lived it from the beginning. They don't understand it the way George R.R. Martin understands his story. However, even so, you need to understand who the characters are. And I'm convinced at this point that wasn't done. The time wasn't taken to do that. And nor was any consulting done to do that. Because what ends up happening is you end up with Daenerys Targaryen, one of the greatest characters created for a while. I mean, she kind of fell off after a while. But one of the greatest characters created, who makes a decision that makes no sense at all to her character, who instead of being prompted to burning everyone alive, just does it at their weakest point, after being the breaker of chains, after being the savior of the people. The people are the only support, are the only reason Dany has ever had to do anything throughout the whole series. She doesn't care about the noblemen. She doesn't care about anyone except herself and the people. And the people don't reject her. I don't care what you say. I don't care if you have Varys write a letter. Why does she trust Varys, who she's about to kill, that the people don't want her? We need to see it. And again, this is, back to the exposition. Varys telling Daenerys that the people don't want her is exposition. It's not satisfying, and it's not enough to make a person go insane. What should have happened, and I talked about this in a recent blog post, she should have went after the castle. She should have killed Cersei, burned down the Red Keep. And at that time, she has her chance. The people face her then. And the people, knowing what Varys has told them, which is that Jon is the rightful heir, reject her. If the people reject her, Dany has no one, and her character arc is complete. She burns everyone to the ground, which would have been awesome. It would have been awesome if it was earned, but it wasn't. I mean, I'm pretty sure the showrunners said, or the Emilia Clarke said that, like, the reason that I guess she was given was that Missandei died, and that's it. That's why. So you just lose one friend and you murder thousands of women and children, innocent. That's it. Man, I mean, those guys must be pretty sick. They must be pretty sick if that's all it would take. I mean, they asked if Jon, like, I think Tyrion asked if Jon would do that. Jon said, or because he thought he wouldn't. I don't think any character would. I don't think most people would unless they're insane. And Dany wasn't insane to this point. So again, character arcs, keeping characters the same. That's the first thing I learned. The second thing is magic elements and keeping those consistent. And this is the reason why this show has fallen possibly out of my top 3 shows I've ever seen. And it was honestly either number 2 or tied for number 1 for a while. But I can't look at it the same at all, because none of the magic was consistent or explained. Bran is just this oracle for like no reason at all. We don't get a satisfying answer as to why. Was it to be the king? I don't know. Also, can he see the future? I thought he could, but some of my friends said he couldn't. Why does he know the reason? Why did he said that he came to King's Landing because of this, to become king? How does he know that if he can't tell the future? And if he can tell the future, what's the point of him being king? He's just going to make every decision that he knows he's going to make. For what? Like, why is he doing what he's doing? For who? And why? And if it was for someone, or for like the better of the people, why did he just let Daenerys burn everyone down? That seems kind of weird. That seems kind of sadistic. That doesn't seem like someone you pick as a king. Anyway. And then you have, again, the Lord of Light, who the best explanation for that at the end is... I don't even remember the guy's name. Davos, who ends up saying that the Lord of Light is just some guy who helped us and then fucked off. I think that's like literally what he said. He said he just kind of came and then he did what he needed to do and then fucked off and just kind of left us. I mean, that's literally literally Deus Ex Machina for the whole plot. God and the machine. And again, it's not a problem if you use God and the machine. If you use a literal God as your explanation for why things are happening. But there needs to be rules. If the God is only there to intervene and protect the living from the Night King, that would make sense. And we're kind of given that with the way the Red Woman dies after the fight. But why is Jon Snow alive? Why did she bring back Jon Snow? What was the purpose of that? Other than to trick the audience into thinking he was dead. What was the purpose? There had to have been a bigger purpose. And with Jon just going off to the north, to the Night's Watch again, which, like, why is the Night's Watch even a thing? Oh my god. What's the reason? What's the reason for all of it? Finally, the other key thing that I've learned, and I'm glad that I've had for a while, is the reason why the series is what it is. What is the message? Why are these things happening? And in the end, what are we supposed to take from it? And the Starks winning seems to be it, honestly. It just seems to be like the Starks finally win. Except none of the men win. I mean, it's literally like every strong man loses and the rest of the Starks are just good. Robb is dead. Ned is dead. Even the matriarch mom is dead. What's left is Sansa, who, like, if it wasn't for Bran being king, her storyline would have been good. It makes sense that she would want the North to be separate. But why? Why is the North separate when Bran is king? Nothing you say will make that make sense. And then again, Jon Snow or Jon Targaryen, or whoever the fuck he is. You have a twist worthy of Luke Skywalker being Darth Vader's son. I mean, like, that heavy, maybe more, potentially, and you just skip over it as if it is just completely meaningless. I can't even believe it. I really can't. It's just sad. It's a sad day, but a hopeful day. So I'm gonna end on a hopeful note. I don't want to just mope around. We will mourn the loss of Game of Thrones today. It's dead. It's not coming back. And we can't get back the time we lost. However, we can build something better. And we will build something better. And I have. Luckily for you. Cryptic Kingdom, Book 4 of the Civilands series, will establish that this series is going places that one didn't. And that is a satisfying fucking end. A satisfying end. Because without that, there's honestly nothing. If you don't get to a point where everything you've done makes sense and has a reason, and not even a message, but just a reason. You don't have to spew your message all over the place. You just need a reason. A good one. Because characters suffered. They suffered. There needs to be a reason why they did. There needs to be an outcome that makes sense. And I'm going to give it to you. Oh, I'm going to give it to you. Because Civilands is going to end with a bang. It's going to make sense. It's going to satisfy you in ways that you never thought you could be. Because you haven't been. Not by the Game of Thrones writers. Not even close. And they built you up and they let you down, but I won't. I won't let you down. That is my promise today. That is my promise every day. On this series and the next series and the next standalone book that I write. And once it's adapted into a TV show, it will satisfy you in ways you never thought possible. And yes, I mean, part sexually as well. You'll feel it. But anyway, so long, Game of Thrones. Thanks for being surprising. I'll say that. I'll give it that. Thanks for being surprising. Thanks for being something different at times. And I just wish it could have been better. I wish our breakup didn't have to end this way. But it is what it is. We move on. And like I said, my show is going to be twice as good. You bet your ass on that. Okay. We've hit an hour. So let me just summarize by saying thanks again for listening in. Next Tuesday, we will have Chapter 6 of the Civilands series. It's going to be another doozy. Every chapter from here on out will be a doozy, just like the rest of them have been so far. And then we'll catch up the week after that and talk again. I won't have Game of Thrones to review, so I won't be in a grumpy mood. My mood's only going up, to be honest. Because after this weekend, it can't go down anymore. Anyway, like I said, Book 4 is coming out soon. Get your hands on a copy of that once it does. In the meantime, if you'd like to win a free copy, share this podcast, share the books, share the series, share anything you would like that you may, and send it to my contact form. Send a screenshot of your share to my contact form, and you will be entered automatically to win a free copy of Book 4 and Books 1 to 3 if you don't already have those. As always, like, share, subscribe. Subscribe if you're listening on YouTube or in the podcasts, in your favorite podcatcher. Tell your friends. Let's just keep growing this civil gang as much as we possibly can. Be there for each other. It's a rough world out there. We're going to keep growing with our characters, who will be consistent from beginning to end. I fucking promise you that. And we will love each other. We will move westward endlessly. And one day we will look back and see what we've left in our wake, and we'll be proud of it. I don't know if the writers of Game of Thrones can say that, but we will be proud of it. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening in. Thanks for making it this far. Thanks for sticking with me through episode 10, and I can't wait to talk to you again next week. As always, my name is Nicholas Austin. This has been Tuesday Night Fiction. Have a good one.